did that for the Nier as well.
I did.
That was a good one too.
Yeah, near Automata. I did the thumbnail, and those of you watching, welcome episode 62 of the Leonis support. Yeah, had a little fun with the thumbnail today too, in anticipation of Final Fantasy VIII, which is the real big collab coming in here within the next week or so. But before we get ahead of ourselves, happy Monday to everybody. JB, welcome back. What's going on, man? How's the weekend? How's the week starting off?
Going pretty good. Was holiday weekends up here. I went up to New Hampshire, did some camping up at Lake Winnipesaukee, and kind of had some good family time. Saw some fireworks, and got out to the lake, and yeah, enjoyed the outdoors. How about you? How was your weekend? See any fireworks?
None. I was completely inside. No, I'm kidding. We saw them. We did not intentionally go out to see fireworks. We did kind of just lay low and enjoy the time off. And we've been spending a little more time outside, just driving around with the top down of the Wrangler. And I've been going running outside a lot more recently. But I have still been glued to my computer playing Final Fantasy 14. And we did do a little bit of like a hot dogs and burgers kind of thing for the fourth, but we didn't actually celebrate per se. So a little more low key.
I feel like the we've lost a portion of the guild to Final Fantasy 14. This past couple of weeks, kind of deep into Dawn Trail, and been a little bit quieter around War of the Visions, I think, since that game come out. We mentioned it last week, and it's kind of continued here into this week also, which is fine. It's always good to kind of break away and play some other games too.
Dude, yeah, Final Fantasy 14 is funding War of the Visions. If Square didn't have that revenue stream coming in, they'd have to be a lot more picky with what they're doing here for stuff. So I am absolutely grateful. But you know,
I actually did finish finally Final Fantasy 7 Remake, the first one. So I'm moved on to Yuffie's adventure there, intergrade. So that's I don't think should take me too long, and then I'll get into Rebirth. But another game actually caught my attention. I've been playing Hades on Steam, which it's on a bunch of different platforms. It's like a roguelite type game, but
cool.
really, really well done for folks that like those kind of games.
Very nice. Actually, I want to circle back on 7 because we got some time to kill. But to Eric in the chat, yes, I did get a haircut. Fun fact for those watching, I cut my own hair. I don't go to a barber. I in like the past 15 years, I've gone to a barber for like 1 year out of those 15. It was something that I picked up in college where my buddy used to give me haircuts, and one day it was like, this isn't that hard. Like, yeah, just get a hand mirror. I stand in a mirror so I can see like reflection in the reflection. I get a pair of clippers. Then I have like thinning shears, do my thing. I Google some pictures. There's some YouTube tutorials. It's nothing crazy, not layering or coloring my hair here. Just a little simple fade, but very convenient and way cheaper.
So like the COVID lockdowns, you were already set. I remember like struggling
Yep.
trying to get my haircut during those few months.
Yeah, no, no, super convenient. But I'm glad to hear you finished 7. At this point, I think it's fair to announce a little bit of the spoilers because it's been out for quite some time. What do you think?
Really liked it. Yeah. So, it was cool kind of seeing some of the different twists and turns that they took from what I remember the original. It has been a while since I've actually played the original, so to be fair, like maybe some of it was just stuff that I didn't quite remember. But kind of the whole, sort of Shinra Tower, kind of climbing through that and going up against Rufus and
Yep.
finally against Sephiroth was all very, very cool, very cinematic, and yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to Rebirth now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I thought they did a really good job of being kind of meta and fourth wall breaking with the whispers that they had this like original timeline to preserve, which is the timeline that we know. And obviously they're kind of introducing this like parallel universe, which I don't mind. I'm usually not a big fan of parallel universes because it typically is just a way to like pad and milk content, which this kind of is. But at the same time, as long as they do something new and creative and unique with it, not the worst. And I feel like this was tastefully done. That if you replay the game, there's not a whole lot that changed. There's only a couple small things, so it's not like it's a complete divergence. It's really just some like Easter eggs that I am intrigued to see how it goes. But I thought it was a really good way for them to flesh out Sephiroth and the ancients and Genova a little more in terms of like the power that these people have in the universe. That in the original one, it was yeah they like they're one with the planet. There's some life stream stuff, but I think they're really trying to like actually like give them some universal impact, which is cool.
I am sort of gearing up for them to pull the rug out on Aerith dying, and maybe Tifa dies, or maybe nobody dies.
Who
Who
knows?
knows? But yeah, I'm kind of expecting some twists and turns because, like you said, it is a divergent universe now.
Yeah, no, very intrigued for you to play Rebirth, and I love what they did with the NPCs. Just on a final note, I thought that was one thing that gives the game more life. That was one of my problems with the initial seven, was that I felt like a lot of the characters were kind of not flat, but like they don't hold the test of time as well, and they could, and this game did it. Like the Honeybee Inn and Don Corneo and all these other NPCs, they've created NPCs too in the district of like the woman who owns the pleasure house or whatever, and obviously like Biggs and Wedge and Jesse are like way more like that was all fantastic what they did there.
Yeah, I really liked kind of the combat system, as well as kind of as an update to it wasn't quite what they did with 15, and it wasn't quite what they did with 16. It was kind of somewhere in between, which I liked too. So you could kind of just button mash it if you wanted to. You could kind of go classic and put in some commands, slow it down. So I like what they struck a balance there with the gameplay too.
Absolutely so. But we will move on from that topic for now. I know seven is a favorite though, so it is still fun to like talk about here. But Final Fantasy VIII is the big title that we are discussing tonight, where we don't have a technical release date quite yet. We can estimate, I think, based on some of the login, but even that, I think there could be some speculation. I haven't really done the day count to actually nail down when it might come in, but all we know is that it's next. And so, on that note, we're going to be talking about Seifer, who's the big namesake of the collab, Squall, Irvine, and Rinoa. All of those characters got MA2 upgrades and limit break upgrades and weapon upgrades. So we'll kind of go through them to give some preliminary thoughts, and then we'll obviously talk through the topics about is it enough, is it good, a whole bunch of Q&A, and then yeah, we will do some actual Q&A toward the end here as well. So those of you that have questions that want to bring them up, always feel free to. But yeah, the collab, what are you expecting? Like, do you have an idea or prediction of when it's dropping, or thoughts or hype or anything?
Well, we kind of tried to make a prediction last week based on the login bonuses, and we ended up being a couple days off. They kind of just bam surprised us with the late news, and then the unit drops on Friday,
Yeah.
right after the holidays. So that was interesting. So maybe they're going to do another Friday release this week. Maybe it will just be a week out. Maybe they'll wait until Monday, and then maybe they'll do some kind of video or live stream over the weekends like they've done in the past. I don't know. The live streams and the Hiroki gifts have been kind of less and less as time goes on. So I'm not expecting anything, but either way, we do know that this is, like you said, this is what's coming next. As for the collaboration, it's I think that it was a good move to kind of go to this one, because I think that being one of the more recent ones, the characters honestly weren't so far off that they could potentially come back and maybe be viable with those upgrades. So, and I think that they did hand out some pretty good ones. So we'll talk about those in a second. But why don't we look at Seifer first?
Yeah, definitely. And he's the new unit coming in as part of the collaboration at a 100 cost, which not always the case. Sometimes these new additional units like Fang come in at a lower cost, but Seifer is not one of them, and he does fall in the Sword Warrior class. So I think it's been a little while since we had one of those pop up, but Sword Warrior has certainly been the benefactor of a lot of good balance changes and more recent characters and vision card emphasis. And I think we've already seen some JP results on how well his usage was, but I think even you and I, doing a preliminary look at his kit, did see some very promising things here. Where I'll keep hammering this term in here, the equalizer idea, that he's a unit that comes in and has so much innate penetrations. He's got enough luck with the Halloween Lucio vision card. He's got enough built-in accuracy himself. There's enough utility on these abilities, and I'll just kind of highlight a couple of them. One, and the most important that I think, is the debuff weakening decrease. That if you have debuff weakening on your unit, he can reduce that, and his allies can reduce that by 30% for 3 turns. And debuff weakening notoriously is kind of a way to hedge against like how much healing power down it gets applied to you, or how strong the imperils are against you, or if there's agility percent down, how the turn order stuff. So I think this is a good way to kind of like correct how much some of that affects the overall game. But even then, he's got a great AoE crush on a very liberal AoE here. It's kind of that calculated Ren shape of the large cross, and on that, it's a break physical barrier, which we've seen a pretty good uptick in terms of Sephiroth, and obviously these HP physical barriers. The Dispel re-raise is kind of a gift on this too. I think this is great even without it. But you also throw in the effect that he's also got the healing power down at 50. That all of this, in particular, the AoE res down at the crush, I mean, and the healing power down, when you combine that with the debuff weakening, makes these a little more potent than you might be used to seeing. And so there's way more to still go in here, but I'll at least pause there. I know that's kind of the big selling point, but yeah, what are you thinking here for Seifer?
So yeah, he's got the that barrier break, and it's on kind of the calculated Ren. So a lot of people have been comparing him to King Bradley. So it's the same range and kind of a similar effect there. The difference here with Seifer is he doesn't have the CT shenanigans that it's a double turn you like Bradley does, which to this day still gives him value in the game. And if he does pull off that double turn and throws two calcs at you, you're in trouble.
And actually, can
That
can I just pause on that note? I actually do. I think that's like a really big thing I want to circle back on. Although we refer to it as like Bradley like, I can't emphasize enough that CT aspect that you mentioned is what made Bradley Bradley. It's not that actual ability. And again, just as like a comparison, Zidane came out with a really similar ability of a cross shape type. It's not the same range, but it's a physical barrier break here as well. And there is like other attributes on it that when you look at it, you might describe it as Bradley esque. But the CT up within his kit is really what made him oppressive. That, yes, the ability is kind of similar. I think that's where the comparison stops to a slight degree, though.
the big thing here though is he does have that imperil on here with the 60% AoE crush, which is one of the few ways you can shut down Bradley is if you have a ton of AoE resist, like Gilgamesh does. Like he is the first unit we've seen in a while that has that significant amount of area resist, especially when he gets his buff online. That's combined with this high level of debuff weakening really has made him extremely tanky, even against those greatsword teams that have been really packing a punch towards most of the units in the game for the better part of this year. So that is where, like you said, he is an equalizer. He can turn off your debuff weakening, at least 30% of it, get you that imperil, and kind of cut through that barrier, which, it's interesting how barriers have kind of ebbed and flowed in their value, over the past year and a half. This year, they've been one of the best ways to protect you. And when this unit comes in, though, that's going to change a little bit because we haven't seen an elite barrier breaking ability like this since King Bradley, I would say.
Yes, Astrius, Lightning Astrius came close, but he had there's it was yeah he came close, but Bradley's really the one that set the tone for that. Yeah.
But the thing is, I think that the range being 6 is really what sets apart
Yes.
this type of barrier break from there have been units that are decent at it there, but usually within like the 3 to 5 range.
Right. Right, and against the A2 in particular, who had a great ranged barrier seal, their barrier break was really not all that effective because their barrier breaking ability got sealed ahead of time, and that's not always the way it plays out because you can make the case that even Fang has a really good long range barrier break, but that obviously you need more than just that. So he does that really well. I was going to say too, just on the topic of crushes, I think this is again part of that conversation, is that in addition to the innate 40 defense pen and slash res pen that he has on the singular passive, he does also have on the sub job here, and kind of similar to Fang, ironically, this 60% defense crush as well, and his limit break is also a 60% unit res crush. And so again, it's just that kind of idea that like no matter how you end up trying to resist him, he's just a unit, and this has the dispel on it too. That's also part of it. Is that he's just going to do what he wants to do no matter what, which is kind of unique to him. Not every character gets access to this amount of like crushes and penetration as easily as he does.
He's really poised to shut down the current meta team or current top team, which is Sephiroth and Gilgamesh. His skills are perfectly designed to counter, directly what they do with their barriers, with his high level accuracy to shut down the semi evasion Sephiroth, with the debuff weakening, which the Katana and Red Mage jobs do specialize in with their vision cards. And then even the healing power down, he's got the 50 and then he adds another 20 on the on hit effect. So
Thank you.
70 total. Does have a couple of dispels, including, um, like you said, on the limit burst. So yeah, I think that he's a great unit. His one other interesting thing that I kind of noticed about him is that his barrier, his own barrier, is a general um,
Yes.
50% barrier.
Yep.
It's a turn-based one rather than a hit-based one.
Yes.
So, assuming that you're not going up against a barrier breaker, that's actually pretty significant. I think that that's even better than a 7,500 HP barrier in some instances, assuming you can get it for that full 4 turns, because you're going to be able to mitigate quite a bit of damage
Right,
if you
right,
do.
right. And just to differentiate why the pros and cons for those that may not know the barrier mechanics. Let's say you have a 3 time barrier. Well, if you have a triple hit, you're going to essentially take away all 3 barriers because it's only 3 times that it prevents the damage. When something like this is turn based, you know, you can hit him a million times, but as long as it's still within those 4 turns, that damage reduction is still active. That's incredibly potent, and this is something that does come into the equation of things like the follow-up attacks, where that's considered a damage reduction. And so, even if Gilgamesh ends up hitting you 3 or 4 times with that follow-up, this is a general. It's what applies to that magic scaling damage reduction. So yeah, absolutely good call out there on the turn base rather than the time base.
Yeah, so just to looking at the chat here, Eric asks if he is a must pull. That's a tough call. I think that a lot of people that skipped Bradley last year, if they could go back in time, they would pull him. I think though that Bradley lasted so long, like we said though, because of the CT and the double turning, it wasn't because he was like an elite, tank buster or barrier breaker. I don't know. I don't know if Seifer has that additional X factor beyond just being, like exactly what the doctor ordered for the current meta in terms of countering what's there, and B, being like an amazing tank buster, debuffer, barrier breaker.
Um,
He doesn't really have that X factor, in my opinion.
You guys, I apologize here. We're gonna have some fun with this. We're gonna turn this to a Final Fantasy 14 stream for a moment. Uh, I told JB there's a spawn that I've been waiting for, and it's only once every 3 days or so. And there was a good chance it was gonna pop during the stream. Turns out that it did. So you guys are gonna have to forgive me while I AFK here for a moment and play some Final Fantasy 14 and kill this boss. But I'll piggyback off the Seifer topic. I can kill some time here in the meantime. The only, and we actually were going to address this later. I think the only pushback to him being a must pull unit is how economical it is to get the mind spheres for him. Where this last week with the double drops or the have time barracks time, one of the recommendations was like throw your Final Fantasy 8 units back in there, and I got almost 300 mind spheres in that week from them. If you pulled the other Final Fantasy 8 units, all the extra shards you're going to get are going to be the Final Fantasy 8 shards. So even if you have to pull him, he should be cheaper to max because you should be doing pretty decently from a Mind Sphere perspective. So, it is the kind of unit that we know right now how many permanent pull units we've gotten, Lucille being one of them. We know Shrek is another one of them coming in here. So you might get away with saying, yeah, as a limited time unit, he is worth the pull because you really don't want that FOMO a year from now, or even 3 to 6 months from now. A year is long, quite honestly, that you missed out on a character that does have like equalizing meta impacts. And I think that's what's so important to me is with him being an equalizer was that it looks like the kind of stuff that's just universally good. I can't see many metas that would come by where what he brings doesn't still have intrinsic value. Barriers are always going to be on the table, it seems nowadays. Debuff weakening is a really core mechanic that's in a lot of tanks, that's in a lot of vision cards. The healing power down of 70. Obviously, healing power is an immense part of, or healing is an immense part of the game, then obviously that still has a ton of value. That I don't see many things in his kit that say, oh, this is meta tuned or it's just for the timing. I think a lot of things go beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is that we also kind of know what the next shoe to drop is from JP, which is this new wind magical unit, which has kind of, turned, a little the meta a little bit over in terms of some of the physical units that were being used. They're starting to fade out in favor of this sort of Gilgamesh slash, wind magic damage dealer. I don't know. I feel like his kit is good enough that if you have the viz, you probably should go for him, because I do agree with a lot of what you're saying in terms of, this is a key part of that warrior team, and warrior we know mixes so well with great sword, with red mage, and some of these other teams that people have invested pretty heavily into. So if you went for cloud and you were kind of gung-ho about, building him up and are looking to get additional value out of cloud, I think that this is a good unit to go for. That's kind of another feather in his cap. They work excellently together, especially if you also grabbed Luciel, or if you're going to grab Fina, because those two units definitely need support behind them. They're kind of classic bruisers. And one of Seifer's key weaknesses is that he doesn't have like a secondary survival mechanic behind the barrier.
Right.
He doesn't have like, courage or re-raise. He doesn't have even reflex or anything like that. So, you can, there has been situations, and I've seen it in PvP videos, where if the damage lines up right, he doesn't even proc the heal back, and then he just gets taken down in a couple of hits. So
Right.
um, that's kind of something to think about too with this unit. Do you see yourself investing into one of these support units to be able to get the most out of him?
Right, and that's why Lucille is such a well-timed unit. She gives him a very valuable re-raise with the seal capability on it. That absolutely elevates him to another level. And to your point on, oh god, where's he gonna go with this? Oh, the survivability. Yes, he is very one note on his heal back, but he does also have some damage absorb mechanics too. But those are still turn dependent as well. We saw instances like with Sephiroth, who's very like heal back dependent. That if you just get chained down and you never get the rebuttals to ever try to do that damage, it absorbs it. It really doesn't mean anything. But I think the other thing that kind of stands out to me as a good incentive to pull is the fact that it's a dark unit. We talked about this before. Dark as an element is in very poor shape at the moment. Thank you guys. I finished my fate. I very much appreciate it. Boom, I got my scales. All right. So we will segue back here to a more topical, appropriate stream view. Him as a dark unit. Yeah, if you were ever trying to use a dark team again, or some kind of two dark units, I can't see any units currently that really like are poised to go into the future of the game. Raph has made a little bit of a case, but we've not seen that in practice. I really don't think that Vivi is gonna ever be that guy again, unless there's a rerun and people decide to reincarnate him. Like even then, that's a stretch. So from a dark perspective, I think Seifer's got a lot of value.
Yeah. There was some questions in the chat there regarding like how he would mix with Ash and Mont. I think I maybe saw Bradley mentioned in there also. Yeah, obviously Knight and the warrior class work immensely well together. So I can definitely see that. My only issue with Mont right now is he gets slapped around by Gilgamesh very, 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 very decisively. Maybe Seifer is good enough against Gilgamesh that maybe changes that dynamic a little bit. I can definitely see that happening. I think it makes a big difference if he comes in and gets the long range barrier break, and then Mons comes in next and then can follow up with his LB and maybe take him down relatively quickly. I think that it's at least going to improve that situation for Mons, where he hasn't really been doing very well in this current meta against Sephiroth and Gilgamesh. Because the other thing is he's so heavily reliant on his heal back, and curse shuts him down quite a bit too.
And if I could just
Uh,
interject on that, even then, even if Seifer does enable Mont, it's probably going to be short lived with Shreka coming in because there's been a direct correlation with her rise and Mont's fall. So even though Seifer might be that guy for a little while, I don't see that lasting, at least in a top end perspective.
that unit is something to think about too, because she also has a very chunky HP barrier, 7,500 HP barrier,
Yes.
and the early footage on Cypher against Shrek has been a mixed bag, but I feel like that's at least a kind of something like an X's and O's thing where we're going to need ways to get at that unit, and a barrier break is going to be essential in doing it. So despite him maybe not excelling super well against magic, I think that he can be maybe part of that equation. So if you see yourself skipping Shrek, you might need an answer to him. Cypher could potentially be that answer or part of it.
Totally agreed. And I think the last thing I was going to focus on here, um, where was it? No, maybe that was it. Because there are still things to consider, but I think we said everything that we wanted to about him in a nutshell. Oh, I appreciated this. The Dispel debuffs to self. Again, this is one of those abilities that it's a very high modifier as a single target ability. I could absolutely see him using this with like some decent frequency. That again, when you talk about like kind of keeping things not swaying one way to the other, the fact that he can dispel debuffs to self is also a really nice like potential survivability tool in terms of dispelling an imperil or a healing power down or whatever it might be. So I like what they've done here. I think we've analyzed the heck out of them. I don't know how much more we could say.
Serve in the chat, it says, "What about settling for the vision card?"
Yeah,
We'll talk more about the vision card next week, but
yeah,
because it should be we should be getting Cypher in the units, and then next week should be the vision card. But I don't think that's a bad play, to be honest with you. It's going to be a key vision card for Warrior, especially because they don't have an area resist card. That's their first one. I want to say I think Knight is on there as well, if I remember correctly. So
you know,
that it's going to enable that. We could look at it real
we can
quick.
flash it. We don't have to do a deep dive. I will say, I remember our initial impression was favorable of this vision card. We do think it's a good one. I just honestly, it's been a little while since I've seen it.
Second to last one.
There we go. Yeah, so Sword Warrior, Sword Knight, and Fist, and it's one of those area resistance related ones with the Human Killer. Yeah, yeah, we'll do a deep dive in this next week, but more ammunition wise, Sword Warrior and Sword Knight overlap well together.
Yeah, just kind of extending that relationship, which to this point has already been very good, just purely built around that Lucio vision card, Halloween Lucio vision card.
Totally. So I'm gonna ask, does Light have a solid warrior group? The answer is yes. That's new Lucio and Bart's. Now I know Bart's a little bit power crept, but like you can still make him work. I've seen him surprise people. Sword Warrior. Anyone else I'm missing in Light? I feel like it was no, that was it. It's really just those two.
It's been kind of a hallmark job for the elements. They have quite a number of units in it, so yeah, I think that they especially have been kind of working around light and dark within that group, and you can bring in the dark Bahamut card. So I mean that's another thing to think about with the vision card. If you're like a mono element player, or you're going to be dealing with just light and dark, maybe you're mixing Fina, Cloud, and Cypher here, you can go back to that dark Bahamut card and skip over this one.
Yep.
It's like we said, it's more kind of building into the job play. So
Totally so. And we do know about his weapon, which it's good. It's not game breaking. I think it's likely best in slot for a variety of reasons, but I think it's debatable. It's the extra 5 healing power compared to the Truststone passive, the free accuracy of 15, which I'll be honest, I don't know if he really needs because he's so high in his luck stat. But if you're not doing that build of him, this is certainly nice to have, that you just have a free 15 accuracy. The AoE res, this one's okay because there is more AoE pen in the game. That how much value is this really? It's certainly still fine. I like this. But I would have to think a little bit more in terms of whether it's still best in slot. But I like the weapon,
Yeah, I think like the biggest item competing against this one would probably be the blood sword +1.
which I think I
I
might
would probably,
prefer.
yeah, just to kind of give him a little bit of heal back there. Because there's no like big penetrations on this. The area was like the stats here are nice, but
Yeah.
I don't know if they're that compelling that I would use it over the blood sword.
No, if anything, it would be a justification for maybe freeing up one extra Truststone passive, because I know healing power is a must on really every Truststone passive. That if this is what gets them an extra 10 modifier, cool, but I still don't think that's better than Blood Sword with the initial AP as well.
Yeah, agreed.
But yeah, we'll keep going along here. We'll go through all the units. And next up is Squall, who got admittedly done a little dirty as the, you know, what do they call it? Titular Final Fantasy character of the series. That he came out at a time when there were certain bare minimums you needed to compete, and he really was just missing some of those bare minimums, like the courage and the re-raise. It, I think even he has no barrier here. His teammate buff is realistically like pretty bad. It's the kind of buff that does repeat. It's a buff that 20 defense is fine for him because he has defense pen down to enemies, but obviously very one trick to just like physical damage dealing. Protect is kind of a nothing burger. And the restore AP, he kind of doesn't need it. He's got enough other AP mechanics in terms of regenerating AP on some crit hits, and his limit break has an AP regen that there's a lot of deficiencies here in the kit. And, we'll talk about the upgrades specifically that he's getting. I'll mention just high level. One of them is AoE res pen of 30, which is immense. This is fantastic as a new tech because his ability is, by and large, this large diamond. And so his necessity to get through some of that AoE res without having any kind of dispel AoE wide guard, which is obviously the other new mechanic. He does not have any of that. So this is really necessary to do any kind of damage. Because we've talked about this too. This slash imperil of 38%, number one, gets cut a lot by debuff weakening. And number two, most units can push very high in the slash resistance. You can get to 40 or 50% with some of these vision cards very easily. That this does not put most characters in the negative, and so it's not an enormous damage increase because it does not make many characters go negative. So he needed that AoE res pen. And the other thing here is the where is it? The slash pen of 10 is certainly nice, a little cherry on top. I'll let you speak to this one though, because I know honeycomb's your jam. His honeycomb barrier, big increase here, and I'll let you talk through the mechanics of what's actually getting upgraded here.
Yeah, so this was kind of, there was a lot of hype around this ability when he was first released before we really kind of tested it and used it in practice. What it does is it's 10% mitigation per tile of effectiveness. So it gets up to a 40% barrier at its maximum range. His original version went from range 4 to 7 and beyond. This one is going, it's basically they're making it much better here. It's now starting off at that 10% mitigation at minimum range 2, and then the maximum range 5 and beyond. So basically, if you're within, say, 4 tiles, you're still going to be getting a 30% barrier. 5 tiles, you're going to be maxing out at that 40% barrier. So a lot of units with those diamond hits, sometimes they're going to move back from you so that they can line those up and get that full 5 range. So, I think this makes it much more effective and usable, viable as an actual barrier, which he didn't have any, other type of barrier in his kit. Doesn't have any secondary survival mechanics, other than like a nice counter against slash damage. But reaction block can also kind of shut that down too.
Pretty heavily, absolutely right. And
So
yeah,
it's a significant upgrade for his survivability, because when that was kicking in, it was quite nice. It does stack with the Ragnarok Trials item also, which is kind of in another sort of mini honeycomb barrier for physical damage. So I think between the two, he can have like I want to say like 60% barrier when he's at that 4 to 5 range. So pretty nice upgrade for him.
It is, in particular because as of right now, there's no way to get around this. There is no honeycomb break, and the only one in sight Shreka has on her limit break, and it's only the magic aspect of breaking the honeycomb barrier. So there's no counterplay to this. So from a pure mitigation perspective, that's one of the benefits that there is no crush on a honeycomb or a honeycomb break, like a barrier break. So that does have some intrinsic value, and I do like what this does for making them attempt to like get as close to you as possible to do the most damage, because as they naturally get closer to you to maximize the damage calculation, it does line them up really well to execute this AoE, where there's going to be a natural tendency for the enemies to funnel toward him to get caught up in this, which we've talked about when Joom came out. This is still like a really great ability. The healing power down of 50 and the defense pen down of 30 on a unit like Squall, who's very high on the defense side of things, certainly is a nice survivability mechanic.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the main abilities that we were looking at when Joom first came out, and we were looking for answers to kind of keep her in check. We tried Squall, at that time. Honestly, he wasn't bad. He was serviceable. The problem was, once you started getting any sort of hint of magic damage coming in, like Oldoa or anything else in there, and he just couldn't stand up to it. I don't think that aspect is going to change. He's still really not going to be good against any sort of magic damage. Gilgamesh is really going to hurt him as well. Although the honeycomb barrier, like you mentioned, is effective against magical slashing. Also, his I believe his counter, it does will
Yep.
take effect there also. So maybe he could be okay against Gilgamesh, but yeah, I don't think it's going to be his main squeeze.
No, no, and we'll get to
I
his.
think that
Oh, go ahead.
I think that yeah, let's look at the limit burst, and then I'll get to that second point I was going to say.
I was going to just skip ahead quickly to his weapon just to talk how this intersects with a little bit with his kit. One of the big upgrades here is, and he's always been kind of crit rate dependent. The +6 version of this is getting a extra 50 CT when performing a critical hit, which I like a lot for him. I had recently built him just for like kicks with the Sword Knight group, and I forgot how bad his agility is. He's actually very slow, and you didn't notice it at the time with the Helena Vivi meta because everyone was around like low 100s for agility, but I was really min-maxing his agility as high as I could get, and he was tapping out at like 109, which was very bad because that was like the most I could get him to. So the extra love here, and reason why I point that out, one of my favorite ways to build him, I actually this chain reduction ability, I usually either have this off or I had it unleveled, and that's a bad idea if you're a PVE min maxer because this needs to be leveled if you like PVE for high scores with him. But what I was doing was I was reducing the modifier on this so that he would prefer to use this ability instead, because I loved this mechanic of decreasing the CT of 15% and restoring 200 to himself. So now all of a sudden to add that with the weapon on here to get 250 CT potentially, I think that's kind of thing that does help in small doses.
Yeah, I like that ability quite a bit too, and also the I think both abilities actually are pretty nice from his main job sub.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, the other upgrade that he's getting here is the limit burst,
and this is
and this
substantial.
one, yeah, this one is substantial. It's getting a range upgrade. It's going up to 5 range, still staying the same AP amount, but it's adding a pre-damage barrier break physical. It's adding a unit res crush 60%, which is kind of whatever for him. Like he has some single target moves, but I'd say he's more leaning towards AoE.
Yep.
Good for like a tank busting potential here though. You're gonna nail somebody with a 4-hit attack and kind of ramp up a chain. It does go to a guaranteed hit on this one as well, which his accuracy is honestly not great. And then he's going to retain the AP restore. That stays the same. Honestly, pretty solid limit burst upgrade. Got some 3 additional effects there, and
Yeah,
the range upgrade.
I totally agree. I think this does good things from an AI perspective. That if you look at this large diamond, the range of this is the 5 squares away, which was equal to the old limit break. And so there was some debate which one he would use because this does have the imperil on it. So oftentimes you might not open the fight with this limit break when realistically you probably should to get your AP restore online this early. And then you consider the fact that it is a 4 hit, which we're talking about like breaking a 3-time barrier. This limit break alone would break someone's barrier. So I think the fact that now you add in the unit crush to it, with the just good old fashioned, they're just going to give it to us now. Forget um, you know, 4th hit there. Now you can just break it for free. I think it is a good upgrade. I don't know if it elevates them a lot, but it's a smart change overall.
Yeah, honestly, I think they tried to do right by this unit because, like you said, he kind of came out as a dud unit. You know, Orange, please earmuffs. He was bad.
Yeah,
Let's be real. He was a bad unit. He was kind of a swing and a miss by the developers. Of course, you know, I'd say these upgrades may be coming a little bit late as the meta is kind of starting to shift a little bit back towards magical damage. But I think that what this does do is that it does allow him to do what his job should have been this whole time, which is to deal with June. And I think that he's going to be able to do that very effectively. Does it make him a unit you should pull if you didn't have him before? I don't think so. If you had him before and you built him up, I think that you can look forward to these upgrades. I think it's somebody you could use if you're seeing water out there, and you can start mixing this guy in.
totally. When we first got the announcement of this, and we are at 40 minutes, so we should move it along a little bit. But the last point I'll try to make here, when this was first announced a couple weeks ago, when we knew it was coming, June was a lot stronger, and I liked his upgrades a lot more because he seemed to be answering a need that the game had that they were trying to do away with June. We've already seen Joom, and we can even see it here. We've seen Joom already start to decline in utilization. It's not enormous, like she's still an exceptionally good unit, but the need for Squall to come in here and be one of the tools is really not the case. You can already see Joom has dipped from like the 80% utilization rate down to what? 37%. So Squall's coming in a little bit late to answer that. But Lightning with Lucille is going to be better than it has been in a while. So Squall is a benefactor of her for sure. When you talk about a unit that doesn't have any kind of re-raise, Lucille can give him re-raise for a fight, gives him haste, which we said is a very slow unit. The synergy of the two of them, I have real high copium for, but I don't think it deals with the meta, quite frankly.
His vision card is also returning, which was our last remnant of the mono element era.
Yep.
Kind of given that the unit resistance and attack, so that was very similar in a lot of ways to Esther's vision card, which a lot of veterans did have. Newer players, should you pull for it?
I'd say no.
If I would say probably not. I think unless like you have some real definitive need to play mono elements nowadays. I really don't think that there's a compelling reason to do it. So I would probably skip that one, to be honest.
Well, my argument is that if you're a new player, you've missed out on a lot of the good lightning units that you would ever use a mono lightning team with. The permanent pool lightning units outside of Elia really aren't that great. I think going for Squall and then his vision card or whatever else is just not a good economical use of resources if you're starting from zero.
Yeah, the only case I could see for it is if you just came back and you just grabbed Lucille and you're gung ho about Squall. That's about it.
Yeah.
Everybody else can skip it, I think.
Nope, totally agreed. But we also have Irvine getting an upgrade here, and his big thing with the MA, and again, they've actually done some good upgrades here for him. I think Irvine's upgrades are better than Squall's upgrades, quite honestly. He's got an extra 30 human killer here, which does affect his follow-up attack, which really is his defining feature that everyone was excited about, never came to fruition. So that's certainly a nice DPS increase. In addition to just all of his attacks, it's not just the follow-up damage, so that's certainly nice. But they're also giving him a kind of permanent 25% physical damage reduction after 2 hits received, which this is really great for that survivability. That this is also in addition to the fact that he's got a one-time, where are you, 50% general barrier as well, that you stack the 2 of those, whatever first hit he takes, he's not going to take much damage from it. That's really all they ended up going with here. They didn't alter anything else from the MA, but I think these are 2 half decent ones, and then we'll look at the limit break in a second. But any thoughts that stand out to you from the MA?
I like the human killer. I dislike what they've tried to do by kind of doubling down on making him a bulky gunner because at the end of the day, I just don't think it's going to work. Um, I think I would have rather have seen +1 or +2 range there instead of the physical damage reduction.
I'll agree with that.
That's in my opinion what his problem has been since the beginning. It's just not only is he a missile unit, but he's a missile unit that's trying to be in the mid to front line, which he doesn't have the bulkiness to be able to do it, even if you include this new effect.
No, I would agree with that, but I don't know. I recall the limit break trying to address some of that here, where the limit break initially was kind of this like unnecessary. I don't even want to call it a tank buster because I don't think it's that, but it is relatively shorter range to line up that it is a 5 square range only in a straight line. But what they've done now is make it cheaper. It's 39 AP instead, but it's the missile imperil of 38%, which is very nice because missile resistance is at an all-time low. That is a almost full 35% damage increase if you're making someone go negative by that amount. The defense pen is still there. The accuracy of 40 is actually very nice here because he's not that accurate of a unit overall. But the big thing here is the debuff resistance of 100, which we saw on Sadali's limit break, which means that you can literally get debuffed by nothing for 3 turns. Now, that is dispellable, so some arguments about whether you just dispel it and then you just kill him anyway, but I think, tried to address a little bit the A, strength of this in terms of really making it harder hitting, and B, giving him some kind of survivability once he was in the fray already, after maybe the barrier is already broken, after that 2 hits is already worn off. It's not amazing, but it seems like they tried to do it.
I absolutely love this upgrade for guild raids.
Yeah.
He's got a 3-hitter with 38% missile imperil.
Yep.
So he becomes an incredible guild raid unit. The survivability, I definitely I can see what they were trying to do. I'm just
I don't think it's enough
just
either.
don't I just don't see it working. So I can't advise anybody pull this unit. Definitely don't pull his vision card. The vision card is not needed for anything. But if you have the unit, he's fun to play with at a minimum. It's just that I don't know if the results are going to be there.
No, I would agree, and they're giving him a unique weapon here, which is technically an upgrade because the other weapon was absolute garbage. The formal halt might be the worst weapon in the game. I actually don't even want to waste your time by going through how bad that weapon is. But this one is giving him the 20 defense pen, the extra 15 human killer. Again, really nice angle they're going with here. In addition to the crit rate with the high 20% crit rate on it. Again, it's not going to salvage this unit, but it's everything this unit needed. So I'm giving these upgrades a thumbs up, but I really don't think it's going to do anything, unfortunately.
Yeah. And the other thing, I mean, we have a long standing history with missile units as well. So it's, who are you going to play them with really at
Right.
this point? They're,
Right. If you want a follow up attack, just put Gilgamesh in your team or put Shrek in your team. There's literally no. You can put Bartz in your team before you put Irvine in your team. There's no reason for him at all.
yeah.
But I guess that's all we have to say. I will haggle with you though. I didn't think his vision card was as easily a skip as you might have implied, and maybe this is just my memory failing me, but I feel like I actually ended up using this a fair bit for a while there. Who's on it? Bow, gun, dagger, spear. So you know what? I was using this for spear teams, but you're right. This is an easy skip right now. Spear and obviously bow, gun, and dagger are not doing anyone any favors right now. This is an easy skip. You're right.
And like the main attribute is 50% attack and some acquired AP. So it's like a modest upgrade over Ifrit or some other, like, because this is going to be a secondary card no matter what, in my opinion. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Good call.
I don't think you should pay. I don't think people should be spending 10K on that right now.
Nope, I would agree with that too. Which brings us to the last unit of the collab, which is Rinoa, who was the free unit, and they are going to reissue her for free again. So great for players coming in that you'll get Rinoa for free, but for those veterans, you'll just get 40 Mind Spheres for free, which is part of that conversation about how cheap it is. And special shout out to you mentioned this that they are going to be in the Gil. There's going to be Gil shards in the shop that you can buy shards for all of these units for some pretty cheap Gil, quite frankly, and that's about 240 Mind Spheres if you had all the units from the initial run. So, yeah, if you're pulling Seifer, you're already at 280 Mind Spheres. For him, it's a very cheap build from there. But uh, for
Assuming that you had all the units from before.
correct, yes, good asterisk there. For
Yep.
Rinoa, the upgrades they're giving her, they're doubling her cast time reduction, going from 200 to 400. They're also giving healing power of 10 and 25% debuff weakening, which all in all, I like these. I think the 400's nice. You know, I think she still has problems with damage in general. I'm not impressed at all with her damage as of late. From the few times that I saw, it just did not seem to age well. It was good back then, but seemingly fallen off a cliff. So the cast time down really is more for the healing that I would think as a breakpoint than any kind of offensive AI, which is important. You need to heal more reliably. The healing power of 10, I'll be honest, I don't think she needed. She already is like a nuker for how high her heals get because they've given her a 310 modifier on this heal. 310 is a sizable modifier to heal. It's certainly nice. I'm not complaining, but I didn't think that was a problem. The debuff weakening certainly is nice, though. Just it's one of those things that every little bit matters, and although it's not going to change this unit, 25% is still a form of damage mitigation, so I like that they gave her something else other than just the lightning resistance, which was my initial big problem. She was a huge AoE res unit only, and now that there's all this AoE pen in the game and all these AoE crushes, that angle's kind of gone. And they gave her this lightning resistance, which was great during the Elia meta, but very niche in hindsight. So the debuff weakening is nice.
Yeah, because that helps her protect that sizable amount of area resist that she can acquire.
Yes.
I think in a lot of builds she could get, maybe
Oh,
around 60, maybe 70 area resistance. Then she has her haste buff that can get her even more on top of that. So, um, Glove is also a job that does have access to some debuff weakening vision cards, so you could build upon that, and suddenly those 60% crushes can become maybe just 30%, which is pretty significant for her survivability. The healing power, I think, is just to combat all of the healing power debuffs
yep.
that are out there. That's just kind of keeping up with power creep. I do like that skill time activation, like you said, especially for the healing, because she would get caught in sort of those long cast cycles sometimes. So I think that's going to help her out a little bit.
Absolutely. And what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, the AoE res. I remember at the peak of the solo meta, she was sitting at 100 AoE res for a lot of these fights. I remember people hitting her from afar and she would take one damage on a lot of their AoEs because she was at 100% AoE res. I remember being quite impressed. But
Still think she's going to get one shot by a Gilgamesh plume,
I,
unfortunately.
unfortunately, I completely agree. But they are upgrading the limit break as well for a very good upgrade. This limit break, I'll be honest, I turned off most of the time because of the innate range of this. It's a 6 range ability, and it's longer than anything she has on her main job, which means she'll opt to prioritize it as opposed to maybe using one of these other buffs. And that was one of the underrated things that I didn't appreciate enough about this unit. I was really only looking at the double haste ability here, but if you look at the sub jobs here, the Grimoire Keeper has a very valuable 7500 HP barrier. You also have a very valuable buff here that has the decrease AP angle, which we obviously have been leaning into to like reduce enemy AP. But even on the what was it, the Red Mage, I liked having this for some reason. Why do I like having this? I think I just like having jamming thrust here. No, but really
Yeah.
the Grimoire Keeper was really the big one from a buff perspective, and so yeah, you would turn this off because you didn't want TMRs too. The TMR conversation, and I'm sorry, and her own self buff. This was the skill activation time she desperately needed. That they're kind of helping out a little bit here. The magic damage reduction is still nice. It's kind of whatever, but these are certainly still nice. The nullification of silence and berserk, those are very handy nowadays. But the rest of the limit break, this is a big upgrade that it's getting the 60% AoE crush, so way more damage. And then you're not only getting the dispel haste, but the nullify haste, which I need to think more about the effect of that. I think it's to eliminate people using haste after for a couple turns. That you
Yeah.
will not only dispel haste, but you will prevent them from using haste after this for a set amount of turns, and also adds in the poison here from range. So I love this upgrade. I think it's still debatable whether you'd have it on or not because her job is not to realistically do damage per se. But there's enough utility in here. I'm gonna second guess that. I think it's a great upgrade.
I think that I think that this is good enough now that you would want to have it on because it's, say you were still using this with like a Bradley, for example. This is going to get him that
Yes.
AoE crush to lead off the battle. He's going to suddenly do a ton more damage. It's going to stop units like Mons from using their LB and getting the haste effect. Um,
Yep.
and a lot of those units, they're using haste as like their second buff. So if you get her in a position that she's using this on her first or second turn, she can maybe prevent that as well. Maybe that's a good bait in that situation,
Yep.
especially getting the poison on there on top of it, which, since Saul has fallen off, nobody's really protecting against that one these days. So
Yeah.
I think it's an excellent LB upgrade. Out of all the three units, that when this collaboration first came out, surprisingly, Rinoa, the free unit, was the one that got the most play. Even at the top end of the game, she was used widely in the Earth, kind of that mono Earth team for quite a while with the evasion angle. Uh, yeah, I don't. The problem is because we are kind of in a follow-up meta at the moment, which are unit-based attacks, and the follow-ups that we're looking at with Gilgamesh and then soon with Shrek are magic-based. So that even that barrier is not going to help her out. So at times are going to be a little bit tougher, I think, for the meta conditions for Rinoa, but I still think these upgrades were good for her.
Couldn't agree more. At the end of the day, are these enough to make these units playable? I'll be honest. I think the answer is no. I had some copium. We'll look at the upgrade here too. I'm sorry. This is the reduced magic damage you might have just been referring to. This is on her weapon and AOE penetration, which helps. But she's got to select two as her main offensive ability. So this one I'm a little bit confused about. It obviously helps the limit break, but I don't think it really does much else. Unless I'm
She does have an earthquake attack, which is that Earth in Peril,
Oh,
which I think is like
which is
a
very good. I never see her use it though. Maybe that's a cast time problem. This is a very good ability. I just never saw her use it.
she would use it occasionally, but I think this is another thing where the cast time will help her out too.
Oof, yeah. 200? Yeah, she needs a
Yeah.
cast time reduction for that.
So
Actually, and nowadays this actually might be better because it's a smaller AoE. That the AoE wide res mechanics, this is actually a little bit stronger because of that.
and if she does lead off with the LB, I think she'd be more apt to use that because it's going to kill any area resist on the targets. So
Excellent.
I think it's like a wombo combo.
Excellent point. Yeah, at the end of the day, I don't think any of these units are going to be playable in the current state of the game, unfortunately. I thought maybe Squall purely on the fact that he's a Joom counter, but the game has evolved past that already. Rinoa is, to your point, very fragile against a lot of what these characters are bringing. Irvine has always been niche and continues to be niche. It's really just Seifer who's prime to really make a splash here on the scene.
I
And
can I can see maybe kind of in like the mid tier Guild War that Squall could still be used now because I think the greatsword teams are still being used pretty widely, probably maybe in the lower ranks, and I think he would do quite well against the greatsword team. The traditional, like, even if Sephiroth is mixed in there, to be honest, because he's not a unit that's relying on re-raise or healing to kind of do what he's to do his job. So that curse mechanic doesn't really hurt him too much.
I don't disagree with any of that. I actually had high hopes for him. I think the only thing that dashed my hopes was simply using JP as that roadmap to say, did I believe it go as high as like what top 50? Maybe we'll go on offense here. Offense is always better to look at for versatility. Then if you went top 50 units used, and even if I filter on lightning, Squall's literally not even there. Let me hold. On, let me go a little more recent. Uh, 2 weeks. Yeah, more recently, Squall's not even in the top 10 that I can see, unless his icon is buried in there. So, as much as the theory crafter in me really liked it, this image was really enlightening. Because this is not top end, this is top 50 guilds. Top 50
Yeah,
guilds is very liberal,
got people using Ravius in there over Squall.
right? Like, actually unreal. Maybe they just don't like Squall, totally possible. They just, no one likes Squall, so they said see
Yeah.
you later, but yeah. But
Oof.
that really wraps up the conversation for things coming into the game when it does drop. We did want to maybe talk a little bit about the meta discussion though, with Seifer coming in, with Fina coming in, with Shrek coming in, and just doing some just general observations, at least on the JP side, to what we're seeing from a meta trend. And when we do these filters, there's two big differentiators. Number one, you can look at offense, I think, to get a more well-rounded view on how good some of the characters are, because if you go to the defensive view, you start running into problems with the top guilds that run walls, and that very much skews the pick rate. And there's enough scheduling things that go in with the chess match of which opponent you're going to have that determines what your wall is going to be, that it's not as much of like an unbiased look at characters overall. There's still a very strong correlation because only good characters can be used as walls. You don't see walls made up of bad characters in top 5 and top 10. So there is still value there, but I know we tend to use that as kind of like a stress test cutoff point. We will still expand it just to see what the other ranks look like. And I'm going to go to June 26 here. But I don't know how well you guys can see my screen. Okay, you can see it pretty well.
And this is the JP meta.
This is the JP meta. You can see Shrek, since her uh, introduction, has kind of seen a fairly high meteoric rise, and some of that is um, balance related. That no one's really gearing for magic resistance, just because Gilgamesh is very slash heavy, despite the fact that he's a magic scaling unit. But there are some things about her with the Dispel Seal capability that can't be underrated. The follow-up attack that dispels AP restore, when you talk about Ashen King Mon, you talk about Sephiroth. Even Seifer has an AP restore. We didn't even talk about that on Seifer. He does, so that gets rid of that too. All these people using Veritas of the Wind TMR, it's still good. She does it for you, so you don't have to do it the same. She obviously has seen a huge rise. Nothing more to say than that.
Yeah, I mean it doesn't get much better than that. You know, you come out the 1 week and you're, you know, vying for a top spot and top pick rate in the game, right next to Sephiroth and Gilgamesh. So I think that tells me what I need to know about that unit in terms of her power level. If you know, what if Calic wasn't telling me already. There was a comment from Serve in the chats. Assuming that I only have resources for Sephiroth Cloud, is Cloud more future-proof than going into Gilg or Shrek, Monolight with Fina, etc.? It's a tough question. As we can see here, Sephiroth is the most used unit in JP, and that's the same story on defense. I'd say that probably has more to do with Gilgamesh and him having that primetime partner. On the other hand, Cloud does have Seifer, and that's kind of his partner in crime. They have fallen off, you know, quite a bit here over the past couple of weeks, with, you know, Gilgamesh and with especially with Shrek coming into the meta. They've taken a little bit of a dive on defense. Um, I think I think they're both viable. You know, it kind of depends on your account and what you have access to. And I don't think that either one is a bad option. If you have Gilgamesh, I would probably lean towards Sephiroth, though.
I'll agree with that. I think Cloud overall might be more like generically future proof because he does have some good anti magic potential as well, particularly with Fina, who you mentioned, who has that shell capability, and Cloud can seal shell. I think that's an underrated synergy. And the thing with Sephiroth is that unless you have the Sorrow Vision card, I think Sephiroth's ceiling for you is very limited. I really do think most really good Sephiroth builds have the Sorrow Vision card there into some capacity for the evasion and the HP and stuff. It's not all the time, but if you're missing that, you're missing a key component of maximizing your Sephiroth. Whereas Cloud's a little more forgiving, that the light permanent pool vision cards a little bit better, quite frankly. Dark Bahamut, regular Bahamut, obviously even just the generic like light vision cards, I think still do decently well for a newer account, as opposed to the fire vision cards, which are garbage in the permanent pool, like the worst vision cards in the game. So I do think Cloud is, for that kind of account, probably a safer pick overall. But yeah,
I agree. He's safe. He's versatile. You know, you can configure him in a number of ways with the Keen Blade plays, with his barrier and things like that. So, you know, I think it all comes down to Gilgamesh and whether you're going to go for Shrek. I think if you're looking at either of those two units, I would go with Sephiroth. Otherwise, I think Cloud is fine.
Definitely. I know for me, one of the things I look at here too, just from like a visual charting perspective, is when I see a character with a rise like this, A, who rises with them, and B, who's the loser, who's the one that falls. And just as a general observation here, it does look like King Mont, obviously, to really no surprise, is one of the big losers, not only just from the wind to earth matchup, everyone knows that, but I think what she does for like the AP dispel as well, and what she does for like sealing buffs and that matchup, he's obviously not a solid contributor anymore. I think Lucille also does see a little bit of a dip here in overall play where she is more of an anti-physical support. It's not that she can't compete with Magic, and I'll be honest, I think Shreka and Lucille is a half-decent combination. Staff Devout and Staff Mage have some real great vision cards. Shreka has no courage or re-raise, Lucille can give it to her, and those buffs that Lucille can hand out, Shreka can seal buffs on hit. So I think there's some really good stuff there on paper for the two of them. So I am slightly surprised that Lucille sees the drop here, but in the face of Gilgamesh and Sephiroth, maybe that's not surprising. But I do see Dario on the rise, which is certainly cool to see too. That Dario and Shreka are seemingly a viable pair here.
Or using Dario to combat against her.
Right,
Kind of the flip side of it.
right.
Either way, he's got both a partner or somebody to fight against. So that is something that I noticed as well. He's kind of seeing a bit of an uptick. Although, if Gilgamesh is in the party, that's not ideal for him.
No, no, no. Because Gilgamesh, again, we keep saying, can bypass his aura to teammates that for that singular attack, the large diamond does not take into account the magic mitigation reduction. But I still keep reemphasizing against his limit break, it does. Against the follow up attack, it does. Against the 120 ability, it's the guaranteed hit. That's the smaller AoE, so it's technically more damage than Spirit Pen. It does. So while, yes, that one attack bypasses it, there's still a lot that Gilgamesh does. And I've always said this too. All Dario needs to do is limit break Gilgamesh and berserk him, and you're good. Like, I still think that's like a hidden X factor for Dario that people keep forgetting. That I noticed it when A2 was around. I'd see him like berserk A2, and not a problem anymore.
Yeah, you lose those random like arena matches when that Dario is in there. He gets
Yeah.
the key berserk, and then you know things go haywire.
Yep. Moderately apathetic. Recapping on something. Seth doesn't need the Sorrow card. There are plenty of ways to use him very well in job teams. Yes, assuming you have all the Katana cards. Assuming you have the other top meta units to go with him. The Sorrow Vision card is a very popular build because he doesn't have a lot of good innate bulk, and so the evade angle against like Jum in particular is one way to approach it because he doesn't have much survivability elsewise. If you're a newer account, you don't have Summer Glaciella, and so you can't put him in that team with Summer Glaciella, take the damage reduction. So that evade angle is kind of an important factor to throw in there where he just can't brawl with some of these units. I'm not going to say you can't play with him, but in terms of going through a variety of metas, you kind of need to have that in your toolbox. Otherwise, his ceiling is not really as much of a ceiling. I don't know if that's a hot
I,
take or not.
I mean, I'm not sure what the tangent is. I think that maybe you missed the initial question, but I would push back a little bit on I think you're downplaying Cloud significantly,
Hmm.
and I think that we're going to see how good Cloud can be this week when Seifer comes into the game.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you're downplaying Cloud here. Cloud is right now you don't notice it because he's got no innate healing and he's really one trick to the Greatsword team. And Greatsword right now is kind of falling out of favor, but that's not a Cloud problem. That's more of like a team rock paper scissors problem. Cloud innately has a lot of things that are about to get much better.
Especially if you have Lucio as well.
Right. Like people have not been using Cloud with like Cloud's second buff is the magic barrier. People have not been using that for weeks because we were in such a hard physical meta. Turn that buff back on versus Gilgamesh. See how good Cloud does. That magic barrier does very well versus Gilgamesh. And now if you do go for Fina here and get that extra shell application where you can seal shell, add that 25% magic reduction in there as well. Different kind of Cloud, and you give him healing. He's like the highest effective HP in the game. You add a little bit of healing in there somewhere, he's gonna be a lot better right now.
I mean, there's a reason why Sep is right up there at the top of the game. A big part of it is Gilgamesh. I'm just going to say that.
Right.
So, it's kind of the wombo combo between the two. and Curse. There's just no counterplay to it. Once Gilgamesh starts to fade, once there's more answers to Curse, Sephiroth's going to come back to Earth, and things might open up a little bit more.
Yep.
No doubt he's been dominant though.
Yep. Totally. But I think that's really all that I wanted to talk about for meta observations. Seifer obviously still is very competitive. I mean, maybe a slight downtick, but I don't really think there's anything in the Shreka matchup that I'm worried about with Sephiroth. I think there's still some, like you mentioned, the barrier break that he has to offer. I think the debuff weakening is still important considering she can seal buffs, or I'm sorry, she can seal, yeah, she can seal enemy buff removal. So that debuff weakening is still a way to like remove some of their survivability if they're going to have an above average amount of buffs. Yeah.
I think there's some X's and O's in that matchup that, you know, he can look very bad against her, I'm sure, but I think that's if you change the builds and movement around, maybe he can be more competitive in that matchup, I think.
Yep. Totally. But we are at an hour and 10. I think we've covered all the topics roughly that we wanted to look at. This is the kind of part of the the live stream where we do want to open it for Q&A, and we're kind of already there. These are good comments that we're seeing, and it does drive some really good discussion. Yeah, if anyone has any Q&A here, we want to talk more about things, throw it out here in chat. We'll grab what we can. We'll talk through what we can. I already see some good chatter going on the topic at hand between Cloud and Sephiroth.
Yeah, you keep massively underrating what Cloud actually does. He doesn't have the self-healing, but he's the highest, basically EHP in the game, considering his innate resistances and wide res and all the things that he has.
Uh,
It's not about the unit, it's about the entire package, and I don't think we've seen Cloud's best teams yet.
oh, Garukin asked a good question. Not having the Halloween Lucio Vision card, does that affect your pull for Seifer? Kind of.
I think so.
I think so. That's a big step up between Seifer getting his accuracy and evade that makes him a cancerous character to play against. If you do not have that Halloween Lucio Vision card, you do have to think a little bit harder about whether or not you want to pull for him. I don't think it changes it a ton. Oh, RNJ joined us. What's going on, man?
What's going on, dude?
So, hey, Aaron, we said some good stuff about Squall. Now, we don't have high hopes for him, but we give Gumi 2 thumbs up for what they did. We think he's got some good upgrades coming.
Especially you, who's got the max reincarnated one, so I'm sure any Jooms are going to need to watch out for your team.
I'm Aaron. I'm still upset. I did not get a Squall showcase versus Joom. I'm waiting for that where you just whip him out and just destroy every water unit in sight. But no, we were talking about Cloud still. I do think one of the good things too that we don't talk about often enough, this decrease of buff rate that Cloud offers as a piece of utility here. I've been looking into this more. I'm appreciating this more and more here. This is mistranslated on Votive Calc. This should say decrease buff potency for 3 turns. So whatever buff you do, cut it in half. So if you have an attack buff, a speed buff, a human resistance buff, cut it in half. This has very micro trickle down effects within the fight that is very hard to quantify, but I've come to like it more and more.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have a ton of utility. I think that's, if you put him with Lucio, quite incredible.
Yes.
And I think we're going to say, I think that team with Lucio, Seifer, and Cloud is going to be able to compete with that Gilgamesh and Sephiroth team very, very easily.
I totally agree. And yeah, all right. So yeah, back to the Q&A. Guys, throw out whatever questions you want in chat. I know we kind of circled around there on these same...
Malathar's question about the Lucio loophole with Curse.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just it's not specific with Lucio. It's any unit that's basically if you've started your cast before that ailment hits the units, the healing is considered pre ailment, and that, like I said, that's with any unit who's healing.
Yep, exactly. What's another one here?
Shogun says, how do you counter a Seth Gilga Luciel team? Bought my team in Arena. I a mirror match.
Yeah, there's not a good way to shut that team down. Seth, Gilgamesh, and Lucille is the current new best team. I think Lucille kicked out Summer Glaciella in that team, where Glassy, A, was great for the physical damage reduction, but B, great for the accuracy she gave, because Gilgamesh is notoriously not very accurate. But even just the debuff weakening, and she does do enough like chip damage with the guaranteed hit that Gilgamesh can do a lot of extra follow-up attacks. But Summer Glassy right now is not lasting nearly as long as she should anymore with Gilgamesh, and the amount of courage remove that Lucille now brings into the game. I think if you take out Glassy and put in Lucille instead, although they might take more damage, you're just going to heal it back up. The haste, you just kill them with damage. Not only the haste, but I've been using her supplicant sub job, which gives the 20% damage up as well, which that's extra 20% damage on all the follow-up attacks. It's extra damage on all their attacks, and so I think it's just too much damage that even Summer Glassy can't really sustain through it.
So that specific team with the Seth Gilga Luciel iteration, Gilgamesh without Glaciella, his accuracy is even more in the gutter. So I would say you should be starting with an evasive Sephiroth and trying to get the curse off on multiple units there, the Sephiroth and the Gilgamesh. Luciel probably going to be too far back, but if you can get the other two while she's sort of out of range, I think that that's going to go a long way. Because I have been able to beat that team with the Great Sword plus Sephiroth. So that's Joom, Cloud, and Sephiroth. People I think are underrating that team a little bit right now, including Brad in the chat, who continues to discount Cloud.
I love it. I love it. Brad, we'll have to take that conversation offline for sure. I wanted to circle back too here about what's our prediction of the next collab in JP, where we just had 8. I know we talked about this recently. I think my personal prediction is Final Fantasy IX for the same reason they chose 8. I think these units are recent enough. They might try to give them a little extra love. Zidane in particular, vastly underwhelmed. Even Dagger, hopefully rounding her out to be less of a niche anti-magic unit, maybe giving her some more anti-physical. Vivi, obviously, I'm good. Do nothing, no upgrades. But even if they add in that 4th character like Kuja, I think as a magic unit would be a cool new magic unit to add into the game. And Final Fantasy IX is kind of on a hype train at the moment. There's a lot of 14 is capitalizing off of 9 with a lot of the Dawn Shell expansion, and we've heard the rumors of maybe a remake. So that's my personal prediction for the next collab.
So personally, I hope that they don't do that because Dagger, the Mace group is in the trash. Any upgrades are going to be wasted right now.
Yep.
Same thing for Zidane. His group is in the trash, the Dagger group. Vivi, like Black Mage is okay, like it's salvageable if they gave him good upgrades. So for that reason, I do hope that they go back to Final Fantasy V instead. Red Mage is in an amazing spot right now. Ferris could come in and good value coming in, obviously with Gilgamesh and Glassy. Also slated to get upgrades here with Summer pretty soon. Bart's with Warriors in a good position with Seifer. And then the Final Fantasy V Gilgamesh, probably going to be a Katana unit. So obviously that's also kind of in a good position right now. I feel like that one from a job perspective on actually having value out of what they're trying to do makes the most sense. And that's what I hope they do.
I honestly, I hope they do too. I think that makes more sense because I think those units, to your point, do fit in better. I just using 8 as the precedent only, but yeah, I don't have high hopes if they rerun 9. I don't think any of those characters are close. At least Faris and Bart's are close, and I'm actually a little upset you didn't throw Lena in that conversation. I would have because now you have Shreka, now
Yes.
Dario's coming back. If they give Lena this cool new upgrade as a new support to add a 3rd support into the wrinkle with Fina and Lucille, it would be kind of cool. I am definitely on board the 5 train. If I was a betting man, I would bet 9.
I can see it. I think that those are the most recent ones. The units are the closest. I just think 9 is going to end up wasted if they go to it. Even if they gave Zidane like good upgrades, like who are you going to play him with other than Shrek?
There's your answer. I'm kidding. I did see some other good questions here, though. Hold on a second here. Oh, I want to address Ezog for a second. He's very worthy. Will has done some. He's done some testing with Tifa and Lucille, and doing better than Ketone with Lucille. He sent me a couple videos. I've not been able to dive in them yet, but some free match mocks because Ezog is a strike fanatic, and he has been making it work despite all my downplaying. It's not exceptional, but it is definitely competitive, and he's been putting Lucille into the Elia teams with the strike, and apparently getting some good results. So I want to give a shout out to that because you don't ever hear that. I think it's worth mentioning.
That's a pretty cool pairing. I like the Devout and Fist kind of go way back to
Right.
the final Full Metal Alchemist vision card. So
Yes.
um, yeah, I like it.
It's a good theory craft. I do, and he has the videos to prove it, so I like it. Um, what else we got here for questions? Mm, I'll give a shout out to Brian real quickly. My biggest problem with Sephiroth is his preemptive counter. It's so powerful. I run Moshery, so curses are not an issue for the most part. Um, I don't know
Like
about the
the Earth Mastery.
yeah. I don't know about the Moshery part, but I picked this because I wanted to talk about the preemptive counter. It's my reaction block rate. Your best friend. I don't know if you're reading into it
Oh,
different than
I
I am.
see. He's talking about the 70 cost light version for the Calamity Guard to protect against curse.
Does this 70 cost Moshery?
Yeah, the original, the OG, she's 70 cost.
You're right. Yes.
But yeah, her Calamity Guard protects you against gives you the one hit barrier and the curse
Hmm.
null.
That's a very interesting angle. I remember people talking about that, and it never went anywhere. Very intriguing. Uh, I like it. Good shout out on her with the Calamity Guard. The preemptive counter is really why I picked this, though, is to re-emphasize the need for reaction block rate.
Yes.
The game has evolved so that reaction block rate is a necessity. That's why it's on all the new vision cards. That's why it's on none of the mono element vision cards. That's why it's on none of the older units for the most part. The reaction block rate, and if you're using units like Moshery, who really doesn't have anything in her kit to do anything against it or about it, if you're using other units like that, I can see why that would be a big problem.
Yeah, I mean his counter I think is a 50% proc chance, so you're gonna want like at least 50% reaction block. So that's like a 20% on a trust stone, and that's like some sub vision card giving you another 30%, and that's like at a minimum of what you want to run with.
Yep, totally.
Can use like Bradley's TMR for the 50% reaction block buff,
Yep,
although Sephiroth can
just
dispel that
dispel
one.
it. Yeah, good point. What else? Any other questions? We're at an hour and 20, so a couple minutes here before we finish things off. You see any questions here to call in particular?
Who would you put with Cloud and Lucio? Yeah, put Seifer. Mont would be the other one.
I like Bart's, good old fashioned. I ran into a couple of those in free match. Still viable because Bart's can keen blade like the rest of them. He's got his own follow attack to throw in there. He's got enough damage, I think, nowadays still with the AoE on that singular hit. His barrier is still an immensely good barrier. It's what 70%, I think, if I recall. He is definitely power crept to a degree, but Lucio and Cloud are good enough, and that mono light synergy is good enough. I've seen some promise there. It's not a top team, but I would do that.
He still can bring the damage,
Yeah.
definitely.
What else we got here? I think that's. I think that's basically it. There's a lot of good chatter, but I don't see any questions to say. That's a good topic to
See
bring
some
up.
people speculating on the collab.
I hope not Kingdom Hearts. I see Kingdom Hearts being mentioned here. I'm good. I hope they never bring Kingdom Hearts back again.
I'm totally down with Scorponok, Final Fantasy VI, Shadow, Sabin, the Figure Bros,
Six would be
definitely.
awesome.
Transterra.
I think the problem with bringing these older collabs back is that the units that you rerun are unsalvageable. You literally can't play them, and so I would be hesitant to bring back some of these older collabs, knowing that the characters on them, unless they went Advent Children and just gave us all new units. But I really don't want them to do that. I do not want another collab with four amazing units with three top tier vision cards. That just absolutely drains you. And it's cool once in a while for like a meta reset like we just went through. Sure, roll it out so everyone can kind of get readjusted. But if that's the next collab, and they roll out 4 new characters again, I'm out.
If they do kind of, I'd be okay with like a mid-sized collab with like maybe 2 units and 2 cards, something like that. Maybe one of them is free. Let's do one. Maybe it's like an off-brand collab. Maybe they could do another Persona. Bring in Persona 4. Maybe would be cool. Persona 3. Dragon Quest I saw mentioned earlier. Would be cool to get Sorrow back.
Sorrow getting a 140 would be very cool, and Zoma. Zoma's still a good unit. He could use a 140. He's probably a little past the game balance at this point with the large AOE's, but he's got some stuff there. I think it would still work.
But they could bring in like the new unit, like the main hero. I think that
Yes.
would be cool too.
Um, Quick question from Brady was: did they overtune Shreka? And I think my answer is no. I think it's just that she's the newest, greatest unit. You can make the same case for Gilgamesh. Did they overtune Gilgamesh? And the answer is like, well, maybe a little bit. He's obviously like amazing, but I don't think it's an overtune so much as it's like a new rock paper scissors unit. There's a lot to like here. We're just waiting for the next unit to counter her. That's how the gacha works. They release a unit and then there's some counterplay, and you keep going, keep going, keep going. We might have taken the foot off the brake here now with Lucille and Fina, but even then they do counter Sephiroth a little bit to a degree.
The way the things are right now is very much like the first year of the game, where where basically every new unit was the new meta, and you were waiting the next month for the new unit to counter what you're running today. It's the closest anecdote because, like you said, the old units are unusable. We're really only working with a small pool, and they're gradually kind of building it out. So like every new unit seems like the best one. That's kind of the wheel we're in right now.
It is. I was gonna go back to see year one because they TG said, and then it went Lucia.
Venera, then everybody got Wall and Kilfay. Then we went to Agrius, and we went to Stern. I mean, down the line, it was a new meta every couple months, every month.
It was Kane. Oh, those are the days. 10.
Yep,
There's your meta reset.
that was a big reset. Yeah,
That was a
for
big
sure.
reset. Yeah. Oh well. Well, I think we've gotten through enough of the questions here that I think we're kind of just killing time at this point. But obviously, love the chatter. You guys are killing it in chat right now. Appreciate all the suggestions for the collaborations. I don't disagree with any of them. I would love these. All the Xenogears and Final Fantasy Tactics and all these old school JRPGs like Legend of Dragoon. That obviously gets a thumbs up from me. But I think we'll pause here. Any other final thoughts do you have here?
I don't think so. I'm hoping that we get the news maybe tomorrow or on Wednesday, and that we don't have to wait till next week for the collaboration. Hopefully, we get it this week. But yeah, looking forward to Final Fantasy VIII coming back.
Definitely so. Would be nice just to get Seifer online and see if any of the copium here can come to fruition. But at this point, I think we've learned our lesson for how high we keep our hopes.
I mean, my biggest anticipation with him is just how quick a build is going to be for me, because I have all the old units and I already have like 500 Mind Spheres before I even go into it. So
Yeah,
it's going to be a pretty cheap build for me.
definitely so. I actually like that they went with this angle with him as opposed to Fang, who came out and was kind of a wet blanket as part of the 13 collab. You know, I'm not asking for the new unit to always be amazing, but when you rerun a collab like that, the new unit should be a little more competitive, I think.
Yeah, she should have been bringing the Pierce to the forefront, and unfortunately, she kind of died under the weight of the great swords.
Yeah, and everything else. But yeah, we'll call it now. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us tonight. Thanks for watching it, those on YouTube after the fact, and good luck pulling.